fear of being alone, rejection, external validation, afraid to get out of your routine, this innate burning desire for this, oh my God, intense closeness. Well, now we're talking about anxious preoccupied attachment, and that's what this entire podcast is. So welcome, and let's talk about some attachment. Check it out. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It's your girl, Lori. I am super happy that you are here. This topic has kind of been covered in I've done YouTubes on it, everything on anxious attachment style. I've even done a podcast on it, but I've wrapped it all into the four attachment styles. And this really wasn't supposed to be the topic today. What the topic today is going to be the topic for next week, and that's getting out of toxic relationships, right? You're getting out of relationships that you just don't want to be in. It doesn't even have to be toxic. You just need to get out of it, but you can't get out of it. And I always, what I do is I write down all my thoughts. I've done a lot of stuff in human behavior. I'm a specialist in it. And so, I write all of my thoughts down and I write all of the things I want to talk about. And as I'm writing it down today for what I thought was this week, I noticed so much of the pattern being why people stay in these relationships due to these anxious preoccupied attachments. And I've talked about it in great deal. And I said, you know what, maybe I need to highlight this before we talk about next week's topic, right? And so this is where we are today. And that's just how sometimes things work. Things do not always have to go as plan A. And I tell you guys this on a regular basis, just because you might have an idea, when you are open, the thing is right here is to be open. When you are open to letting things sort of flow, things will take on a life of their own. So that's how we are here today. And on Patreon, there is an entire list, a worksheet over there that talks about a lot of what we're going to talk about, but also gives you where to start healing it. We're going to talk about a little bit of that here, but over on Patreon, we'll go in detail on it, and you will get the worksheet with it. And you can find that link here anywhere that you're getting this podcast today, or you can go to patreon.com/the positivity experience. But let's talk about this today. So as you heard in the beginning, I was like, fear of being alone and all of these things. So I want to go back through some of the basic stuff with anxious preoccupied attachment. Okay. So you can kind of understand it. And we're going to talk a lot, about it. So, let's talk about where that would come from. Okay. Well, actually, before we talk about that, let me give you some signs and symptoms of what that may look like. So one is going to be that intense desire for closeness. As human beings, we all have this desire and actual need for human interaction, right? That's just part of interpersonal relationships, things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I must have this. I have to have this close relationship, and I got to have it at any cost. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to latch onto them. You can see the difference between, oh man, it'd be nice to have a relationship. Yeah, I'd like to just kind of form some bonds. That'd be nice. Versus, oh my God, I must have this. I got to have this, or I'm going to be miserable and lonely for the rest of my life. So you got to be careful of this, because this is going to take you into those big worlds of I will never, or I always did. And that goes into victim state in your mind. But this is how I was raised. And believe me, we're going to talk a lot about that, because believe it or not, your anxious attachment and victimhood can go very close hand in hand. And I don't mean the fact that you were raised with neglect and everything. It's not what I mean. I'm talking about where you are today. So we're going to go a little bit deeper in that. Emotional security. Now, when a secured attachment, right? When you're securely attached, right? Because there is a secure attachment that is healthy for every human being walking this planet. That's great, because you're so good with yourself. You're solid and you know that you're going to be okay. And sometimes that means that, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, and you don't avoid relationships, but you don't shortchange them. And you're like, God, this is such a great relationship, but you're willing to distance from it and set that thing apart and get out of that relationship for yourself and just take your losses and keep it moving. Now, if you don't have that, you're looking for this person, and this can go into victimization. It can go into expectations. It can go into assumptions, all of which we've already talked about. But if you're looking for that emotional support, now listen, I'm not saying don't have emotional support. Of course, that is the foundation of interpersonal skills, is some emotional support. Yes, absolutely. But that's why you also have coaches and therapists and things like that's emotional support. It's not always your best friend, or it's not always, your mom and dad, or, the person. And you'll find that this can become problematic, right? Because if you're looking for that emotional support, it's always done on your time. Well, don't they know that I wasn't feeling good today? Don't they know it's my birthday this week? Like, it can start getting into that expectations, and it can be problematic, right? Now, a massive piece of any attachment style that is not secure is low self-esteem. Okay. Very much low self-esteem. When you have low self-esteem, you are literally attaching your worth into what another person thinks of you, how they accept you, all of these things. This is what happens, right? Your low self-esteem says your opinion of me makes me valid. You in a relationship with me allows me to know I'm lovable, which that's also not fair to put on another person either. Right? So in your mind, you're like, oh my God, I'm giving everything to this relationship. I'm doing it all in this relationship. I want this so bad. I'm willing to buy them. I'm willing to do all of these things. I'm willing to move to the other country if I need to go be with them. Yeah, that's not love. That's attachment. Okay. In turn, that low self-esteem, if you put, everybody on this planet's flawed. Me, you, everybody listening to this has a level of flaws, and we have our own things that we're working on. And you may not be the priority in that. And that's just important to get, because it's hard when you are not healing your anxious attachment, but then you want to heal it, but then you keep going back to, well, this is how I was raised. Now that goes into victimization. So part of you is healing and part of you is staying there. So you got 1 foot in healing world, 1 foot in old behavior. Okay. Not abnormal. Do not beat yourself up. This podcast is not for you to beat yourself up, or anybody else's podcast for that matter, is not for you to beat yourself up. This is about awareness. You got to be aware of your actions and things that you're doing in order to change them. Okay. It's always going to fall back on you, not anybody else. All right. So that goes into the next one, which is external validation, right? So external validation can go into a lot of reassurance. Are you sure we're okay? Like, I know that you've seen this before. I know that you might have done this before. You might have seen people do this before. Like, hey, I don't know. You have a disagreement. And the person says to you, hey man, I'm really, really, really sorry, man. I can't believe that. I can't believe I did that, yada, yada, yada. Or you do that same thing in return. And you're like, okay, yeah, it's cool. Like, okay, we're good. And they're like, okay, so are we cool? You're like, yeah, we're cool. And then, I don't know, next week, you're a little short because, you're busy. You're not telling them everything going on in your life. And they call you again and go, hey, I'm just checking to make sure we're okay. Yeah, I told you we're fine. Oh, okay. Maybe not fine how you want it to be. Now it goes into expectations, right? So now you're looking for that constant reassurance of the validation that we're okay. Is this relationship going to last? Yeah. Oh, do you love me? Yes, I love you. No, you don't have to tell somebody you love them 843 times a day. And you can only guarantee somebody that you're going to stay with them like 2% of -2. Like, you can't guarantee anyone that you're going to stay with them. That can be your intentions. You can say, I guarantee you 100% that's my intentions, if those are your intentions. But do not make promises to people, and do not expect them to make promises to you of like, we're going to be together forever and we're going to be best friends forever. And it's just let it come. Now that's going to be hard for you because you're in the middle of this external validation where you need constant reassurance. And then of course, you have that routine, right? For you, the anxiousness routine is great, by the way. You definitely need it. I'm working on this program right now through the rest of this year to hopefully be able to give it to you at some point in 2024 on organization, on really staying focused, not motivated, but focused on things. So I'm working on this program. That's different. You need that kind of routine. The routine I'm talking about that you do not need is the ones that you've always done. Because remember, if you continue to do everything that you've always done, you will continue to get everything that you've always gotten. And then you're going to go, but I don't understand. I can't catch a break. You think? Yeah, you probably can't. Why? Because you're doing the same exact thing. You're expecting this change to just jump in your lap. So where the hell does all this come from, right? You're like, my God, yeah, it's a lot, man. It's a lot to be here. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't really because of us. Okay. It's really because we grew up in not so great environments. So what are some big root causes to that? Well, one, of course, is, neglect. There was a level of neglect. There was a level of, parental neglect or how you felt. Maybe you didn't feel seen. You didn't feel heard. Maybe there was abuse. Maybe it wasn't that intense as far as abuse. But I think abuse is a very big umbrella, but I'm saying like physical, sexual, things like that. For some of us, we do have that. And that's just another added bonus. Yay for us. Another added bonus as to why sometimes you get in that. Now, I had disorganized attachment, God, up until my mid 20s. And disorganized is taking avoidant and anxious and putting them together and like dating. Yeah, it's so fun. But you can really get through it. I mean, I'm literally a 25 years, let's say 21 years to be safe, 21 years away from any of those attachments other than secure. But it did not start that way. Oh my God, it did not start that way. And so I know what these can be like. And yes, neglect, parental anxiety. This was so big for me. I know for some of you, you have gone through something similar. Where my mom had, first of all, she was really, really sick. Like she had hairy cell leukemia. She had her spleen removed. She had multiple blood transfusions. She had hairy cell leukemia. She had a heart attack. She had a stroke. She had skin cancer that ended up going into her brain. Like there was, and on top of that, that was physical. But then her mental was just such a treat. She had severe anxiety disorder, like severe. I mean, of course, they didn't diagnose that in the 60s and 70s, right? But like, she was born in the 20s. So they definitely didn't diagnose that then. And then she still didn't get a diagnosis until like 80s, right? Until right before close to when she passed. But she was afraid of elevators, afraid of escalators, afraid of going further than she needed to go, afraid of this, afraid of that. And her go-to was always passing out. So I saw that. So that created a high level of hypochondriasis, which is health anxiety. And it also created an enormous amount of anxiety in my life, and I think that's the important piece of that too, right? Is like when you are in that space of understanding where it comes from, we're not blaming. This is that real thin, hair thin line of knowing a reason and making it an excuse. And it's normal to make it an excuse while you're analyzing it and evaluating it. But what we don't do is at 50, I'm 52. I don't at 52 or 54 or 57 or 27 or 97 or 17. You do not keep blaming. Well, this is how I've always known. This is what was always done. Yeah. I know. But you're here now. What are you going to do about it? That's okay that you didn't have those tools. That's okay that you weren't given the tools. It really is. Okay. And, I think that is the biggest thing for you. That is the biggest thing for you is that be kind to yourself, but know that you don't have to have the tools to start it. You start knowing that you deserve it, and then we build on the tools. Then we build on the tools. And that's the important piece of it. You're always waiting, and then you're blaming it, and you're going, well, I wasn't given the tools as a kid. Okay, stop it. I understand that. Neither was I. I got it. But it's up to you now. You're a big girl. You're a big guy. You're grown up. It's time to do something about it. And yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's going to be consistency. It's going to be allowing yourself to be uncomfortable. It's going to be healing that stuff. It's going to be accepting your own responsibility for your life today. Those things. So another reason, you have the parental inconsistencies. Maybe the parent was in your life for a while, then they weren't. Then if you had an alcoholic parent like I did, like with my dad, if like sometimes you'd get this great person, you're like, oh my God, this feels so good. And then, but on a dime that would change. And you're like, oh my God, wait, we were just fine. Oh my God, now I'm scared. Like, you know what I mean? You're like, holy crap. So that can create a high level of anxiety, right? Obviously early trauma and loss, like if you've lost a parent, if you had early trauma, emotional neglect, which I had already said to you, overprotective parents can also make you so anxious. These are the parents who, like nowadays, it would be about social media. It would be about going out with friends, like where they are so overprotective. I don't mean putting in some rational safety. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about full on like, no, don't do this. No, you can't go out with your friends. No, you shouldn't have socials. No, you shouldn't have this. I understand safety, but when you start getting overprotective, you are creating not just anxiety, you are creating a codependency onto you because you're not teaching independence. You're teaching codependency. So that's what could have happened. So if you had these overprotective parents where, you couldn't do anything. And it's funny because Kim and I talked about that. Like Kim's mom and dad were pretty protective. She couldn't even go like to the rink and stuff, to the roller rink on Friday night from 7 to 11. Like she could really just do church stuff. And she ended up going to college when she was, 19. And she came home and she got pregnant with Mark. I mean, her and Mark are together now, but and have been for 30 some years. But the point is, she's like, Mom, good God. No, she didn't call me Mom. She's like, yeah, like she was going to the college. She was doing shots of vodka before class at 8:00 in the morning because she was so sheltered. And it did the opposite of what, I think her family had kind of thought it would be. Bullying can also create that. I went through a lot of bullying. I know a lot of people go through a lot of bullying if you're not the popular child. But yes, so these are the reasons that you have this anxious disorder. It kind of is a disorder, but attachment, right? And that emotional dependency becomes so problematic. So let's go into other things besides just that intense desire for closeness. That's one, like I gotta have it. I need it, have to have it. Fear of abandonment. You are so willing to do just about anything because you are afraid of being alone thing. Listen, I know you don't want to die alone. I got that. I know you don't want to live on your own all this time. Okay, but let me explain something to you. Until you are good with yourself solidly, I don't mean that you live by yourself so you know what it's like. That's not what I'm saying. Full on taking yourself on dates, going to concerts by yourself, going to dinner by yourself, figuring out what you like. Who are you? Well, then you can start forming stronger relationships. No human being can guarantee you right now that they're going to be in your life forever. Nobody. Not a parent, not an adult child, not a spouse, not a sibling. No, they cannot guarantee you that. You look at when people leave as abandonment due to a past trauma, which is why it is entirely up to you to start working on these past traumas. Do it through therapies, do it through somebody like me and coaching who is like really kind of got, kind of their head on the whole attachment thing. Attachments are big in behavior studies because, you learn a lot about Freud, you learn a lot about the theories and it all starts to make sense. And so yeah, I mean, you want somebody who's a little bit more aware of it, and that's a good emotional support. But you have got to be okay with self and realizing that just because people exit your life doesn't mean that it's a reflection of you. They're abandoning you. No, they just maybe that version of them outgrew this version of you. That's all. Don't keep trying to put your round peg into a triangle. Like, stop doing that. Because then you're not you. And then even if they do accept you, or even if people do accept you, that's not even who you are. That's literally not who you are. So they're in love with a version of you that isn't really you. So now they're fake. Now you're fake. Now you have to be this way. I've said this before. I've used this example before. How like in high school, maybe you're like, suddenly you like a band that you really can't stand. I've said that before. Like, no, I do not like country music. I do not. Don't ever invite me to a country concert. But let's say we were in high school and I didn't feel great about myself and we were talking, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go see Luke Bryan. I know that that's a person. And they're like, come on, I'll get you a ticket. I'm like, okay. Oh my God, that sounds great. No, it doesn't. Not to me. It sounds like, no, it does not sound like fun to me. But if I'm in anxious attachment and needing to fit in, I'm going to lie about it and be like, okay. And I'm going to go. Now I'm going to do it up. I'm going to put on a cowboy hat. I'm going to put on boots. I'm going to look like I belong there. And I'm going to be miserable the entire time I'm there. But you'd never know it, right? That's not okay. That's not all right. Because you'll know that you may have a struggle with that preoccupied attachment when you are constant in need of reassurance. Are we good? Am I okay? Are you sure? Yes. If you are constantly seeking reassurance for, do you think this is the right move? Do you think that is anxious attachment, along with other things? It's not just that. I mean, there's a whole lot of things. Now, the funny thing is, the flip of that, still anxious. This isn't not so much, and now it does linger a little bit into disorganized attachment, but over analyzing the relationship is also anxious attachment. You're looking for this. First of all, that's going to carry extremely high levels of this is why you want to heal this stuff. Don't take this into a relationship. And if you're in one, consider maybe putting it on ice for a minute, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to overanalyze it and be like, well, I know that they're going to hurt me, or I just know that this is going to happen. They don't look consistent. And this, like, you want them, but then you kind of are pushing it away, which again, kind of goes a little bit into that avoidant / disorganized over there. But this, believe it or not, is also an anxious, right? Because you're anxious. You're trying to be aware of the game. That's not okay for you. And it's definitely not okay for the other person, right? If a person has to feel obligated to call you 600 times a day or text you 400 times a day and tell you this is what they're doing, where they're going. Oh my God, I'm thinking that's a sign, red flag, baby, for yourself. Not like you're a red flag, but we all have them, right? So you want to be able to see them in order to address them, right? Now, the interesting thing about that is you'll also have that tendency to be ultra clingy. I really don't, and I was trying to think, I don't think I was ever clingy. I don't think I ever really had it. And I've done my attachment theory so much going through behavior studies and just therapies and stuff like that. I was definitely more disorganized, not avoidant. Like I wouldn't avoid relationships, but I can't say I stayed in relationships that weren't good for me. Like even my first marriage with Gene, which is Bugsy's dad, biological father, not, take that for what it is. We were fine. Like I didn't leave him for another person. It just, I was growing one way, he was growing another. So I wouldn't say I stayed too long, because I got out of that probably 5 years in, and that's after having Bugsy and trying to work through things. But then I was still kind of working on myself. And I left that relationship when I was working on myself and thought, this isn't the life that I'm looking for. And that's okay. Right. But I didn't leave because he's a bad guy. I mean, we're fine. We still communicate. I love his wife. You guys know that. But sometimes that's like, okay, but I don't think I was ever clingy. And I think clingy people it was too much for me. Clingy animals, yes. Clingy people, no. But you may find that you're clingy and you're overtly looking for this emotional support. Again, not from like a reasonable amount of human interaction and human support. That's not what I'm saying. But this clinginess of FOMO, fear of missing out. You see somebody out with their friends, or you see your guy has guy friends, but you don't have any girlfriends. So you get a little upset and you feel a little some kind of way because you're clingy and you don't want him to be gone, because you need that person in your life. You need that person there because that person provides you that emotional support. Then get a dog, get a cat, get a teddy bear. Seriously, I'm not even being funny. Teddy bears are proven across the board. Get a teddy bear, sleep with a teddy bear. It does help. I'm telling you, it helps. Psychologically, it does help. And so the clinginess can become problematic, because I know, like if I had a guy, like let's say, Paul's definitely not this guy, but let's say I had a guy and he started to be a little bit like, hey, not like, hey, I just want to spend a little time with you. Great. Oh my God, let's do that. But that innate need to spend time with me and to be up under me 24/7 would just not work for me. And I would guide them into like, hey, is it something that you want to work on? Then yeah, let me help. I'm not going to help you, but let me refer you to somebody, because I'm not going to get that close to this story. So clinginess is another big, I got to be with you 24/7. What are you doing? Where are you going? That's not fair to that person, because they have a life outside of you. All right. So clinginess is another one. And then, obviously difficulty with boundaries, because it's people pleasing. Believe it or not, people pleasing is a massive glowing white light that says, I have attachment issues. Like, hello, I have anxious attachment. I have anxious attachment. That's essentially when I know people are people pleasing, I'm like, anxious attachment. Cool. So then it gives me a space to know where I'm going to work with you on, right? Which is extremely helpful, because I always am going to use your attachments or your anxieties or anything else that you got going on. I'm always going to use that to your benefit by knowing how to treat it. So that's how you know that you might be in some of this anxious attachment. And again, over on Patreon, you'll have that, this worksheet, and it's going to tell you like, these are the signs, and then this is like what you can do. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But the difficulty with boundaries is you have a difficult time setting boundaries, because you go into that oh, well, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Guess what, baby? Your boundaries are going to hurt somebody's feelings and their boundaries are going to hurt yours. Welcome to Boundaries 107. Okay. And boundaries are not warm and fuzzy. They are assertive. They are clearly defined. Now, that also means you must receive other people's clearly defined. And you can also have a difficulty with anxious attachment, not just establishing boundaries, but receiving people's established boundaries. This is why it's very difficult for somebody in anxious attachment to be with somebody with secure attachment. Thank God I'm finally in secure attachment, but Paul's got secure attachment. So it works well. Like if he had, it would be very difficult for me to have, like to be in secure attachment and then have to deal with either avoidant, disorganized, or anxiety. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't have friends who have some of that, of course, and that's fine because we respect each other and they know like where I'm coming from. But you'll know if you have a hard time setting boundaries, boundaries must carry a consequence. If you're feeling guilty about a boundary, if you're feeling like, oh my God, well, they're just not listening when I say I don't want to be talked to that way. Well, why would they? You didn't say, because if you continue this, I'm not going to have a relationship with you. You didn't say those words because you're afraid to be abandoned. Do you see how this goes hand in hand? Do you see how the people pleasing and anxious attachment can go hand in hand? And this is why, again, this entire topic had to be done on its own podcast, because this is one big reason that you're going to stay in toxic relationships. You're going to stay in relationships for the sake of having a relationship because you don't want to be without a person. And when I was like writing it down, I kept noticing I was writing all of this attachment stuff. And I'm like, holy hell, let me do that now. So then next week, I'm not spending 16 hours on talking about attachment, anxious attachment. So yeah. So, what do you do if you're on the other end of that? Okay, so I'm gonna put that back on you too. Let's say you seem like, okay, I'm really working on myself. I feel like I'm a much better person for myself. I feel like my self-esteem is coming up. I feel like I'm becoming a lot more secure. You got to communicate with assertiveness. Your assertiveness is going to look like aggression to somebody with any other attachment style other than secure. It is literally going to look aggressive. Assertiveness looks like aggression. Confidence looks like arrogance. Like there's a combination of things that happen here. It's not your job or your fear or worry to try to figure that out. Okay. Now, how else, like where do you see this in yourself sometimes too? Well, obviously you're going to have to be self-aware, right? You got to be self-aware. You got to be self-aware that you're doing it without judgment. My God. This is never to persecute you. This is to bring awareness. And sometimes it's going to look like, oh, damn, that's me. Holy hell, she's coming in hot. Yes, I am. Because it is self-awareness. You cannot heal yourself until you become self-aware. And the second part of that is not blaming your childhood, not blaming your old spouse, not blaming 65,000 other things. It is a reason. It is not invalidating you. We know it existed. We know it absolutely contributed. I lived it. I did it for years. I promise you, I know that it's real. And I promise you too, that I stayed there for a little bit, as I've been writing about it again in my book. I promise you I stayed there. It's very isolating, very lonely, and it becomes very much problematic. Wow. Very problematic in relationships because you start putting these underlying assumptions and expectations and control and like all of these things in it. So you've got to be self-aware, and you got it. The moment you go, well, this is how I was raised, just pause, go, oh, I'm doing that thing. Okay, that's cool. But what am I going to do about it now? You can't ask for the tools, especially if you work with me. You can't ask for the tools. I give you the tools. I tell you, even show you how to use them. And then you don't use them. And then you get annoyed that nothing's working, but you're not using the tools. Like, nope, that's going to be right back on you. Now, gratitude, I promise you, gratitude elevates you on a whole new level. And I did this whole video on gratitude. It's part of the second book that I'm writing. So you can have second and third book together. Or it's actually in the third book, not the second. And gratitude it's not a fucking list. Stop it with these lists. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. Blah, 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 blah. And don't just be grateful for your family and your friends and no, you're grateful for the tree outside. That's not good enough. You're writing this in your gratitude journal. I am grateful for this tree outside that I'm looking at. And why am I grateful for it? I'm grateful for it because right now the leaves are getting ready to start changing colors. However, even in the spring, when they start to come back, that tree houses birds' nests. So I get to hear the beautiful birds. It reminds me of when, new life's coming in. I get to see it where sometimes when it's windy and I have to look at it and go, oh God, it just feels so good to see, this tree's got a little adversity going to it, but it's still existing. It's fine. Do you hear that? That's gratitude. Gratitude is not, I'm grateful for the tree in front of me. That's not gratitude. Stop being lazy with gratitude. Do not get lazy with your gratitude. Why are you happy about the bird feeder on your deck? I'm happy for the cardinal. Why? Because it's beautiful. It reminds me of my grandmother. Great. Yeah, and every time I see it, I can just remember her baking chocolate chip cookies. Ooh, now we're getting into some gratitude. Gratitude forces you to look at what you do have. The moment you start looking and focusing on everything that you don't have, you're not in gratitude. You're not staying present. Now, another way that you help yourself is through goals. It is up to you to establish new goals. I don't care what the damaged people who did not heal themselves did. I don't care what they said to you. I don't care about any of that. Because at the end of the day, no one cares if you meet your goals but you. I'm a little different. I want to see people win. I want to see you start at the bottom and soar way past me and get to the top, ring the bell, and keep climbing. I'm going to always support that. I'm always going to hold space. Not everybody will, and that's okay. Not everybody has to. They're not obligated to do so. And when you are 100% clear in understanding that your goals have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be attainable. Measurable, okay, like realistic, okay, has to have your micro goals. Attainable, okay, and it has to be based in time. It has to be something that you can react on. What can you react on? What is the routine for it? How can you make that happen? Well, you got to do it, and then you have to show up for yourself. You got to avoid the blame. But this, here's a sign that you're starting to blame. Oh man, I got pissed off because that guy cut me off. No, you were annoyed that you got cut off. Don't blame that guy. As a normal reaction, guy cuts you off. You feared a little bit of like, holy crap, my safety. So, but just say, I was irritated because I was cut off. Do you see the difference in the verbiage? Oh God, I was irritated. I have to work on my regulation because I was cut off. Not, oh yeah, well, of course, this guy decides he wants to cut me off. What? We're blaming again. Shift that blame focus, reword it so your mindset is a little bit different. You also want to challenge any negative thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts. And when you've had a lot of trauma, when you've gone through a lot of stuff, you're going to be solely focused on a lot of the negativity. You're going to spotlight out this negativity. It's okay. We just want to be aware of it to change it. So as we start to kind of come to the close of this, you'll start seeing how loneliness goes hand in hand with this. It really does. Because loneliness isn't about being around people. Loneliness is about being solid within yourself. And then when you're solid within yourself, I promise you're going to see people fall by the wayside, but you will find, solid people. It's not high school. We don't need to be in a clique. You could have a dot, one person. And guess what? For a while there, it might just be you because you're working on yourself. And quite honestly, you got to be your best friend. Before you start bringing in all these other people into your life, you have got to work through these things. It is your responsibility. Let me repeat that. This is your responsibility to work on that. Do not allow your anxious attachments to put the things that you need to work on for yourself. Let's say you're saving money for something. Don't go around helping 10 other people. Why are you doing that? Well, because God, I just want to be a better person. Okay, first you got to take care of yourself. What are the mandatory things that you need to work on? Why are you trying to still get people to like you by putting what you need to do on the back burner? We are not doing that game here. So that's the kind of wrap on this. And now that will go very well with next week's episode. Look, I'll say that and then I'll be like, okay, psych. I was writing something else out and found something else. So in the next few weeks, it will be out on leaving relationships that do not serve you, not glomming onto a relationship for the sake of having somebody, of any type of relationship, not holding on to your parents, trying to have a relationship because you want them to be different, not trying to hold on to your adult kids because you'll do anything to keep them in your life. Why are we doing this? Listen, yes, you make the effort. Yes, you do that, but you don't do it at the detriment of your own self. Okay. So with that being said, take a deep breath. Come on, take a deep breath with me. Exhale. All right. It's okay. It is okay. I promise you, but you got to be aware of it before you can start changing it, and do so without judgment. But again, this always is going to fall back into the seed of you. It's not going to be anybody else to work on it. You don't have to do it on your own, but just remember, this is your journey to walk. That means you must carry the fire to light up your path. You can't expect everybody else to keep carrying this fire for you.
Check it out.